When I sought help, my parents forced me to live on the streets after pushing me out of the house before my SAT, so my sister could welcome her friends for her wedding. Hello everyone. I'm 17 years old and have been studying for the SAT for quite some time. However, because my sister is getting married in 2 weeks and has requested her guests to stay at our house, my family decided to kick me out and send me to live with my aunt in the suburbs. They're the worst. I'm not sure why she couldn't have just requested that they stay at the hotel like the other guests. Although it would have cost her money, I believe she shouldn't be. Given that it is her wedding, she is being frugal. Furthermore, I don't think our parents would have had a problem paying for that because they already cover a lot of bills. My parents decided to surprise me the night before her friends were supposed to arrive by telling me that I had to vacate my room by the following evening, within 24 hours, without even warning me in advance so I could make some arrangements for myself. I tried to explain that there were approximately 7 of her friends, and that they could all remain in the living room and guest room. However, they warned me that having her guests occupy the living room while I had the entire room to myself would be impolite. They began lecturing me on how important it is to be welcoming when we have guests here, despite the fact that these are not even my guests, and I was ignorant of their arrival until the last minute. I also suggested that some of them stay with my sister Melissa and her fiancé Jack, who have their own apartment. My parents, on the other hand, warned me that it would be impossible since they do not want any guests to stay with them, as this would just add to the stress of the wedding. In essence, I made every attempt to persuade my parents not to force me to leave the house, but they refused. Have it. I would now have to comply with their request because Melissa had promised her friends that they would remain with her parents, and they had agreed. To be honest, I had no plans to stay with my aunt before to my SAT, so I made a big fuss about it. She is a peculiar person who does not trust the internet. I didn't want to use all of my data, therefore her absence of Wi-Fi would have a significant impact on my academic achievement. Even after I tried to explain it to them, my parents insisted that I only take my books with me. I also didn't want to stay with my aunt this week, because it's in the suburbs, which is far from where I'm supposed to take my SATs. I couldn't afford to arrive late for something like this, and the commute from her home would be too long. My parents advised me that it would be disrespectful, and that I needed to go since they were not willing to put up with any more fights. I even tried to persuade them not to do this, saying that I would make the sacrifice and stay in the living room myself. My parents advised me not to put them to the test, and threatened to throw all of my possessions out on the streets if I didn't travel by myself. I haven't informed them that I don't want to go and that they cannot compel me to. That prevented me from debating with them. After a few hours, I had basically given up and packed my possessions, and my parents expressed their joy that I had made the right decision and contribute to the family. They then directed me to phone my aunt and see if she would agree to my staying till the wedding. It dawned on me then that my parents expected me to do everything, and hadn't even bothered to discuss it with my aunt. When I lost my cool and began ranting at them, they informed me that it was no longer their responsibility to look after me because I was practically an adult and needed to take care of myself. That felt ridiculous to me because I was only 17 years old, and, even if I had been 18, they would still have had some obligation to me, since they're my parents. I was irritated with them, so I decided to start unpacking and told my parents I was not leaving. Then they started shouting at me and telling me that I couldn't do it since they had already promised Melissa that my friends would be treated well and invited over, so I had to give up my room. I tried to explain to them that having Melissa's friends stay at our house was less essential than my SAT, and that, as my parents, they should be more understanding of my demands rather than always prioritizing Melissa above me, but they were disinterested. Eventually, despite knowing it would be pointless, I called Melissa for help. I have never really gotten along with her. I know neither she nor I like each other, but I figured that maybe, just this once, she'd be ready to talk to our parents and lend me a hand because I didn't want to be kicked out of my house with just a few days till the SAT. When I phoned her and told her to take action and speak with our parents, she said I should put her on speaker. She then told me that she wanted me to hear it clearly, and that she had already promised her friends that they would live with her family, and she was not going to break that commitment. She urged me to leave the house, and if I couldn't find a place to live, I could live on the streets if I wanted, but she didn't mind if I studied for the SAT or anything else. In my perspective, that was the most heartless thing she has ever done. And the fact that once she hung up, my parents did nothing but observe and wait. As a result, I realized how insignificant I am in this household. Furthermore, if I'm absolutely honest, I don't believe they consider me family. For me, that was the final straw. Without saying anything further, I packed my belongings and went to a friend's place. Given that feeling like a burden to their family was certainly not the ideal option. Despite this, they have been very nice to me and have told me that I am welcome to remain with them for as long as I need to, because they understand how difficult things are for me right now. 4 days have gone since I left home, and I finally took the SAT yesterday. Fortunately, despite my recent troubles, everything went smoothly. However, when I returned, I decided to allow myself the space to properly reflect on what had happened. Despite my negative feelings about what had happened, everything has been a haze for me since I left. I hadn't given it much thought because I needed to focus on earning good grades, so I gave it all my attention. However, now that the SAT was out of the picture, I could concentrate on how my family had treated me, and the more I thought about it, the more upset I became since it was all so unfair. Even if I didn't give up my room, I could always stay in the living room. But they didn't want me there, so I didn't understand why I couldn't stay and had to leave. It was embarrassing, and I was so angry, I decided to contact Melissa's fiancé Jack and tell him everything. I simply felt that he should be informed of the type of person he was marrying and the type of family he was joining, even if I had no intention of ruining things for her in particular. To be honest, I had no idea that this single action would have such devastating ramifications. There is only a week till the wedding, and my parents informed me this morning that everyone is going nuts because Jack has supposedly decided to cancel the wedding. They are aware that I am to blame because they are one of the few people who fully grasp Jack's motivation for making this decision. He presumably decided to contact Melissa about it and ask her what was going on. After I sent him that mail last night. To make way for her wedding guests who had flown in, she forced her parents to kick me out of the house, and she opted to be open with him about it. Jack, like any rational person, was upset because it seemed absolutely unnecessary for me to be kicked out of the house at such a critical point in my life right before the SATs. I had stated that everyone, including Melissa and my parents, was aware of the plans I had made during the previous few months. He provided the same possibilities that I had previously examined, such as the prospect of me merely remaining in the living room, that some of her friends could have come and stayed with them, or that they could have all stayed in the same hotel. Melissa persisted in presenting poor excuses for this, finally admitting that she simply did not want me in the house or at the wedding. She didn't want me to stay at the house since, while they'd be gone most of the time, she'd be over frequently to see her friends and other individuals. She did not want to spend all of her time with me because she just felt I was really obnoxious. That was it, she just found me bothersome, which is why she didn't want me around and made my life so tough. To make matters worse, my parents had also endorsed it. Naturally, she and Jack had a furious dispute when she told him this, with Jack accusing her of being cold-hearted and naming her one of the most self-centered people he had ever met. He insisted on Melissa making atonement and finding a way to make things right. He eventually admitted that he couldn't be with someone like her and called off the. She declined to attend my wedding because she disliked me and did not believe I deserved it. This simply exacerbated the conflict. He simply left the house last night after the fight, without even contacting her. She hadn't taken it seriously until this morning, when she believed he'd return. However, when he did not return, not even in the morning, she became enraged and my parents called me. They informed me that I needed to talk to Jack and make things right since I was the one who caused all of the turmoil. Since I told him the truth, I had no idea what they expected me to say. Now, what was I supposed to do? Tell him I was just making it up, and it was all a lie. That is not something I can accomplish. And even if I could, I wouldn't do it. I told my parents, since I believed he had done the right thing, and that I was not responsible for mending her relationship. She should be the one to heal it. Not me. Because it was her relationship. Furthermore, she had encouraged me to live on the streets if necessary, but since I had already begged her assistance, I did not feel compelled to support her at this time. My family has always mistreated me. However, since my grandparents live out of state and I don't know anyone else, I've never had anywhere else to go. Furthermore, I am the type of person who feels bad asking for help, so it was difficult for me to simply show up to my friend's house and ask if I could stay with her. I've never contacted anyone to let them know how terribly my parents and sister had treated me. Now that I had the courage to do so, I was not going to breach my promise and try to repair my relationship with Jack. I informed my parents that, in addition to not speaking to him in an attempt to make things right, I would make sure that everyone knew what a terrible person she was and how dreadful they were, as they deserved it. I told them I'd write an essay about it and promote it on social media so that everyone could understand why they decided to cancel the wedding. Melissa and Jack hadn't made any public announcements yet, but when my parents started pleading with me not to do it, their attitude toward me changed dramatically. This was before I decided to go out of my way to inform others about the occurrence. She would surely point the finger at our parents for notifying me that Jack had canceled the wedding after the incident. They told me they were willing to promise me everything I wanted as long as I didn't talk about it online since they wanted to remain silent. Although I find it unfortunate that they are behaving in this manner in order to avoid Melissa becoming unhappy with them, I am not sure if talking about this incident at this time is acceptable. What if I posted anything notifying everyone that my sister's fiancé had canceled the wedding before she ever said anything about it? I decided not to post anything. After reading the comments, I realized I didn't want to get any more involved in this mess. And that's what would happen if I discussed this online. I didn't want to face the fact that I would eventually be sucked deeper into it. I really don't want to deal with my parents or Melissa, so I've chosen to ban them now that I'm out of it. I've communicated with my paternal grandparents because, despite our infrequent interactions, I've always felt a closer connection to them. I figured I would start with. I decided to talk to my family about these concerns because I believe that is the only way I would be able to find a solution. So, I told him everything. I told them about everything that had happened in the past, as well as recent events. I don't like to discuss it, but I've realized on several times that I'm not very important to my family. Melissa has always been like this, but she has made it clear that she can't stand me. I'd always known she didn't like me, and the feelings were mutual, it's just that recent events were more severe. I also knew that, in the end, my parents would always prefer Melissa over me, because she was the family's golden child, the adored daughter, and so on. However, I wasn't expecting them to take it to such extremes of bias. To summarize, my family has always and continues to treat me terribly. I didn't think anyone was close enough for me to bring it up, so I never felt comfortable talking about it anyhow. I had always stayed mute since I disliked asking for help. But after telling Jack about what had happened to Melissa and hearing his response, I decided that I should start talking to people about it, because I'm confident that my grandparents and others would cut ties with my family if Jack, who was not even related to me, could be a good person and do the same. For this reason, I'm very pleased that I finally told my grandparents about this area of my life, and they responded exactly how I expected. I needed to call them because they live out of state. After I told them everything, my grandfather promised me that they would be flying in by the end of the week and would look after me. They didn't tell me about their plans, all they said was that they couldn't accept what my parents had done to me up to this point, as well as how Melissa had treated me. My grandmother believed she had failed her son in becoming a good guy since he would never have treated his own daughter in such a way if he had been a nice man. This caused her much distress, and she continued to apologize to me. That alleviated one of my biggest concerns, which was that I was my parents' biological daughter rather than an adoptive child. They thought they could afford to push me to the sidelines because of how they had treated me so far, which has made me wonder if I am genuinely related to them. At the very least, I would have received an explanation for the behavior. I don't understand why they've always loathed me, especially since I'm not even an adopted child. I've never been concerned about why Melissa didn't like me because I've always felt that she was just an insecure brat who constantly demanded attention, which is why she couldn't bear the thought of me, her younger sister, receiving as much attention from people as herself. She made a concerted effort to make me feel both important and inconsequential in her own unique manner, and my parents were always there to support her. If I hadn't told him what had happened, he wouldn't have known, and they would have married this week, so I'm sure she's unhappy that Jack chose to leave her over a quarrel that was legally my responsibility. However, everything is a huge chaos right now, and I am sure she is holding me accountable. As far as I know, neither she nor Jack have made any formal announcements about their upcoming nuptials. Despite having blocked her, I have not yet blocked Jack. I continue to follow him on social media, so I'll be notified if he writes anything. That is the issue to be addressed. I'm just waiting for my grandparents to arrive, and then maybe I'll be able to stop going into my friend's hair. She and her parents have given me a lot of love, and when I told her that I'd be leaving by the end of this week once my grandparents came, she responded. They appeared to be disappointed. However, we will be fine because I will be able to see her at school and other occasions, and she understands that this has to happen eventually. For the first time in my life, her parents have been great, and I shall miss her. I got the sensation that I was required somewhere. It is, in its own way, bittersweet. Hello, update 2. My grandparents arrived at last. Because they weren't sure how long this would take, they had a lot of work to do before they could go, so they had to wait until the end of the week. Many things have happened during the last few days. It has been 4 days since my last update, which was yesterday. Melissa and Jack announced on social media that they had agreed to postpone their wedding for an unspecified amount of time. Both of their names appeared near the end of the post. I assume they were eventually able to discuss it and reach that conclusion. The last I heard, they were calling off the wedding, so it's odd that they said they were postponing it indefinitely rather than canceling it entirely. However, given that Jack and Melissa have been together since middle school and have had an intermittent relationship in the past, I suppose it makes sense because, aside from a few rough moments, they have generally been able to stay together. In recent years, I suppose they intend to work things out this time as well, which I am happy with because it is healthy for them. I sent Jack a note describing what happened, but he never responded. My parents told me that he had gotten into a big disagreement with Melissa about it and threatened to call off the wedding. However, based on our interactions thus far, I am certain that he is a kind man, and I believe Melissa will make the correct decision if she can persuade him to stay. In any In any event, my grandparents paid a visit to my friend's house last night after arriving directly from the airport to express their gratitude to her parents and my friend for allowing me to stay with them for so long and for taking such good care of me. I was overjoyed to see them, and even more so to learn that they planned to inform my other grandparents about what was going on as well, but first they wanted to talk to me about it. I was a little concerned because I don't really know my maternal grandparents, but I decided to go ahead anyway, and now that we actually called them last night and told them everything about my family and how everyone knows they've been treating me for a long time. My grandparents congratulated my pal and her parents when they arrived last night, but I had already packed. Following their departure, I moved to the motel where they were staying. It's lovely to have my own place here. However, they contacted my other grandparents last night after we arrived at the hotel and told them everything, and they were equally enraged. Unfortunately, due to my grandmother's terrible condition, my maternal grandparents are unable to visit me at this time. I can see that it would be unwise for her to come over because she can barely move. However, we discussed on the phone and decided that it would be best. They advised me to quit visiting home because my parents had not contacted me or inquired about my well-being since I had gone and prohibited them. They only contacted me once, to chastise me for the chaos I had caused by sending Jack that message, and then I never heard from them again. Because my grandparents still had a year till school ended, they assumed I was unwanted there, which was fairly evident to me. If my friend was willing to keep me here, I could live with them until I started college. After I finished high school, I could live with my paternal grandparents. I thought it was a fantastic idea, so this morning my grandparents and I had another conversation with my friend's parents to convey our plans. Until high school ended, and my grandparents promised that they would. They were more than pleased to accept me back after covering all of the charges associated with the hassle they had gone through. My friend's parents were quite kind. They were affluent enough on their own and saw no need for money, so they refused to accept it. However, my grandparents insisted on repaying them for all of their donations to our family. And despite the fact that I used to occasionally complain to her about how my parents treated me, she would always promise me that she and her parents would be thrilled to have me here, and that I could leave at any time. Which makes me grateful that I got to live with my best friend. I realized she wasn't saying it just to say it, which is why I consider her a true friend. I believe that few people in the world are fortunate enough to meet people like her. And she really meant it. She is currently on level with my biological sister and far superior to Melissa. In any event, I'm glad my grandparents came over and looked after me. They will also manage the legal issues, and as I type, they are contacting my parents. I will keep you all updated on their progress. Update 3. Hello everyone. A few weeks have passed since my last report, and things have changed. For example, I no longer contact with my parents and currently live with a friend. After my grandparents confronted them, they elected to relinquish their parental rights over me, and my grandparents now have primary custody of me. After graduating from high school, I will move in. I'm with them. It's good that none of my grandparents want to communicate with my parents, and they are all righteous for mistreating me throughout the years. Furthermore, I no longer have to worry about college, because I used to believe that I would have to work or take out a student loan to cover my tuition. However, my grandparents have promised me that they will cover all of my expenses, so I don't have to worry about anything. To be honest, I tried to feel sorry for my parents because they had so simply terminated their parental rights, but all I felt was relief. There is no reason for me to feel depressed since I no longer have to cope with my family. According to what my grandparents have informed me, the rest of the family is aware of how they have treated me and how they have simply given up their rights over me. I believe our other relatives will shun them, at least for the time being. Many people have messaged me to see how I'm doing, and even if they haven't specifically discussed the situation, I understand why they messaged me unexpectedly, and I sincerely appreciate it. In addition, Melissa and Jack delayed their wedding informally. They ended their relationship. Evidently, it wasn't only what I told Jack ever since she became engaged, she had been acting in a very bossy manner, which Jack had found difficult to deal with. As a result, my revelation had added to an already heated debate. Given how frequently this has occurred in the past, and how likely it is that they will eventually reunite if they so desire, I am not taking their split seriously.